Hello, welcome to ZIM Capture. I'm inventor Dan Zinn. And ZIM at zimjs.com is an open source framework to make interactive media on the HTML canvas using JavaScript and Create.js. In this capture, we're going to take a look at mobile optimization, and indeed any optimization, but usually we use it for mobile. So let's go take a look at the ZIM site now at zimjs.com, and up in the hamburger menu we're going to go to the news to see an article that we wrote a while back in ZIM 2 or something like that. So let's see. In older posts. Here it is. So optimizing HTML5 canvas. All right, we were doing this when making our second mobile app called Psychic Pixels. And you could draw pixels and then people would try and guess what you've drawn, that kind of thing. All right, so initially we had a hit test point going on, and so there were 100 of these little rectangles here, and we did a hit test point on them, looped through them. And that was taking a little bit of time. So as we moved quickly, we wouldn't necessarily draw all the rectangles. We'd draw some, like I go like that and draw that. What was happening is it piggybacks on the Create.js hit test point, which checks to see if there's a color underneath your cursor or a point. And that's a little bit processor intensive. Hit test point in ZIM also adds the ability to handle rotation, scaling, and nesting. But still, it's a little bit processor intensive. So we worked out a way to do it with a hit test grid or calculation. So we provided the hit test grid, and it just now knows, based on a calculation of the width and the height and how many rows and columns you have, on where your cursor is. And it was a great improvement. So if you do have a grid, mobile or not mobile, you should consider using hit test grid for any rollovers or checks, that kind of thing. All right, also there's 100 of these little rectangles here, so we've got this thing called caching. So first and foremost, we have caching. That's well known, a way to optimize. You would cache shapes and text. So anything that's vector calculations, if you don't need to keep on doing those calculations, then cache it to turn it into a bitmap. There's no point in caching bitmaps. Those will already be handled for you on the GPU. So any shapes and text that you don't need to calculate, you should cache those. Okay, and that will improve your performance. Now just watch that. You want to cache sort of, if you're going to scale something, you want to cache it big in a sense and then scale down. Now sometimes, like in this example, we actually wanted to use 6 of these as a little icon, and we scaled down the caching and it looked really crummy, so I had to end up remaking that at a small thing as well. But in general, you want to cache big, and then you can scale down, and hopefully you won't lose quality. It's just like any image. All right, when you cache, you pass in the X and Y, the width and height. So there's an example of caching. We'll show you some in code in just a little bit. The other thing that was happening when we were building this is we had clicks on all the components at the time, and I just noticed it seemed slightly sluggish on mobile, where I would press and it would like, why am I waiting? Why, there's just a little delay. And there seems to be a little delay in there to maybe check to see if you're swiping or something. As soon as I went to mouse down, it happens instantly. So it seemed very responsive. So when you're doing events for mobile, probably do mouse downs if appropriate. And we've changed all the components in ZIM to work on mouse down base where relative. You can set a ZIM.action event to click if you want to convert all of those back to clicks, but I would recommend leaving it as a mouse down. Also rollovers. Rollovers don't work on mobile, so there's no point in having rollovers happening in your code. Well, how ZIM approaches this now is if it's not mobile, it will turn the rollovers on. If it's mobile, it won't bother with rollovers. So you really don't have to think about that. ZIM will handle it for you. All right, updating the stage. Do not update the stage when you don't need to. Okay, that is a prime no-no. Updating the stage 4 times when you don't have to, when you only need to update it once, will be bad on mobile. You'll start bogging for things. So we've really optimized there, and as a matter of fact, provided zim.optimize all capitals, a constant. And if we set that to true, then even our components will not update the stage. Otherwise, if we don't set it to true, the components will automatically update the stage so that you can see the component changing. For instance, if you're sliding, it's very odd for us to provide a slider and you slide it and it doesn't work until you put the event on it and update manually. So by default, the components will all update themselves. But if you set ZIM optimize to true, then the components will no longer update the stage. Okay. So you've got to do that in a change event, which you'd probably be doing anyway. So if you had a slider, you're going to be updating whatever you're sliding. You're making a change, say the size of a circle, you're going to be updating that anyway. So that's one thing I want to show you in the code. All right. So you can have a read of that, but hey, why don't we go into the code now? Woohoo! Sound good? Yeah. So here we are in a full template, which means we won't get any automatic scaling, but that's okay. We're just demonstrating, how about a slider? So our slider is equal to a new zim.slider, like that, and we will center it on the stage. On the sage. I love it. Okay, let's take a look. There she be. And so without Zim Optimize, our slider is updating just fine, isn't it? Oh, look at that too. Watch as we come close, it activates the rollover, and indeed I can slide it from here. A bit magical, isn't it? If you don't want that, you can turn that off. If you've only got desktop and you know, people can reach your slider no problem, that's great. But this is for mobile. If that's a small button on mobile and it's hard to get your finger on a slider sometimes, so there's a nice big hit area there to allow mobile to work easily. Buttons are usually a bit bigger, but on anything, as a matter of fact, Zim provides a way you can just say zim.expand, and that will expand it by 20 pixels. It'll make a hit area around it. That's piggybacking on the Create.js hit area, where you'd have to make a rectangle though for that. So we do that for you with zim.expand. So anything, you could take a var rect equals blah 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 rect.expand, and you can specify how much you want to expand that by, or just get the 20 pixel default, and that allows people to click on that rectangle easier, especially for mobile. If you do expand a circle though, watch out, because it expands the bounding box, so all of a sudden you would then get a rectangle around your circle that is pressable. All right, well, let's optimize this then. So when we optimize it, we put this code up top. We say zim.optimize. You have to do it like that, equals true. And that means that any of the components will not update their stage, or all of the components won't update their stage. So you ready? Oh, whoa, what happened there? I'm sliding this thing. Oh, it kind of, what's going on? Well, what's going on is the rollover is still happening, because you can't, like, I don't want you to have to handle the rollover, so that's needed. Now, mind you, rollovers on mobile, those are turned off, so we wouldn't see that. But anyway, the rollover is activating, but nothing else is. So when we accidentally roll over it here, or roll off, then the stage is updating and we're seeing the change. So how we would deal with this now is slider.on change, call this function right here. And this is the function where we would be, say, changing the size of a circle. So we would say, hey, change the size of the circle, please. Why don't we do that? But just for now, we will go stage.update. Because once you change the circle, you would do a stage.update afterwards. And so there's no point in two stage.updates. So with optimize on, you have to provide your own update in the change event. So when we save this, refresh, now we're back to working. Why don't we change the size of a circle? Var circle equals a new zim dot, oh, I can do it. My hands are freezing down here in the workshop. Dot circle, And we'll make it like 30 and frame dot blue, like that. That can be any color, such as quote blue. I like the blue that's stored on frame. Those are the ZIM colors. And we'll add that to the stage 2 dot center on the stage. But we better move it up a little bit. Circle dot y minus equals 100. And let's see if we've got that showing up there. So there's our circle. Let's move the slider down a little bit, and we'll make the slider update the size of the circle. Slider.y plus equals 100. And here, inside the change event, we can say circle dot radius is equal to slider dot current value semicolon. All right, let's see what happens. Refresh. Oh, problem, our slider is only going from 1 to 10 or something like that, so we would want a slider going from 30 to 60 or whatever. There. Okay, cool. So one stage dot update. So a single stage dot update is very important, and that happens in something else that we use quite commonly, such as animation. So when we're animating, if we were to animate 2 different things, we don't want to update the stage for both of those things. So in the past, we would use a CreateJS ticker and use that to update the stage, but we always run the risk of having people make 2 different tickers updating, especially when people are beginning coding. They will often do that without realizing what they're doing. And you might have other things going. Then you've got clicks that are updating the stage, and you've got this that are updating the stage, and that's updating the stage. And you don't want that to happen. So we provided now a ZIM ticker back a while ago, a few iterations of ZIM ago, a ZIM ticker that will only ever update the stage once. So the animations use ZIM ticker and the moves use ZIM ticker, and you can make your own tickers as well to do your own custom animations. And when you do, they all call the same ticker, which will update the stage only once. Now, other environments, other programming environments like 3JS and Box2D, they have a renderer that they're running all the time. So they just have that down at the bottom. They say, hey, render, 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 render. And that can take up batteries. CreateJS has done a good job by allowing us to provide stage updates only when we need them. So if you wanted to render, and if you were lazy and just wanted one stage update all the time, no matter what, and you don't have to think about it anymore, then you can just say zim.ticker.always round brackets, and that will give you the renderer style. But I think it's a good idea to pay attention to our stage updates to optimize for mobile, which is what we've done here. Okay, so, and the ZIM ticker also will help handle optimization. All right, what else? Well, that's sort of what I wanted to tell you about. We should talk a bit about caching. For caching, maybe we should make a bunch of circles. Also, I'm kind of looking at this, and I like it when my slider starts in the middle. If we'll go smaller and bigger. Let's do that, and let's turn that round. So we're going to goof around a little bit. Sound good? You in the mood to goof around? Yeah, sure. All right, so the slider itself, let's convert this to the ZIM Duo technique of a configuration object, and we'll make some adjustments here. One thing is we will say that this is the min of 30 and the max of 60. And we'll give this a new custom button. So button. You could use ZIM Pizzazz here and make any shape for this button. It was pretty cool, and Pizzazz gives you a bunch of starting shapes, like a lightning bolt. Oh yeah, would you like to slide a lightning bolt? Yeah, that'd be cool. So, but we'll make just a ZIM button, zim.button, and I'll show you how you can make a button into a circle. So I want a circle to slide. And that would look something like this. We'll drop to the ZIM Duo technique here as well, and we'll give it a width of, say, 40, and a height of 40 as well. That's a starting point. Make it a square. And then say corner, colon 20, so half the radius there, or this is the radius of our circle, so that will make it round. And then we also don't want a label here, so label, not a navel. Is that how you spell label? Label looks better. Quote, quote. Otherwise, we end up seeing click. And let's change its color. Color, colon, frame dot blue. And how about a roll color? Told you we were goofing around. Roll color, frame dot pink. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so we've just added a custom button as the button for the slider. So we save that up and let's see if our custom button's there. It ain't there. Something's gone wrong. Uh-oh. What happened to my... Oh, this is my button. There's the comma. All that looks good. This looks good. That looks good. Do you see anything? Button, G, boop, 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 slider, a bracket there, a bracket here. We're good, good, bracket, 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 pink, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I give up. Control Shift K. Zim container constructor. Oh, I know what I did. New Zim dot button. All right, will you forgive me? Oh, please, please forgive me. There we go. We've got a nice round blue button as the slider handle. Yes. Can you say yes? Now let's get that started in the middle there. All right, to start it in the middle, we're going from 30 to 60. Well, why don't we make this 40 in size, and we'll go from 20 to 60. So that makes it a little bit easier. 20, 40, 60. Yeah, 40 would be in the middle. So we're starting with the radius in the middle between our range. And then just down here underneath, we can say slider dot current value. So not only can we get the current value, but we can set it to the circles dot radius. There we go. And now when we refresh here, there she be. Now, we were wanting to take a look at a bunch of these, so to examine some aspects of caching. Okay, so let's tile 200 of these things up above here. Are you ready? We'll use ZIM Loop for that. ZIM dot loop, and in round brackets we wanted 200 of them, and each time we're going to call this function and collect our I in there. So that's really the same as a for loop, but the ZIM loop does 4 different types of loops. So we'll talk a bit more about those in just a while though. So here's 200 things, and inside we can just copy this kind of stuff right here. We'll make a circle. Oh, we should add these to a container. Anytime you make a lot of things, add them to a container. So var circles, usually the plural, is equal to zim dot container. Container. And we'll give it the stage width and stage height. I don't think we need to in here unless we're centering things, but stage height. Oh, the other thing we should do so we don't forget stage height is add this to the stage. So add to is a method that we've added to Zim, coincidentally, in Zim 4.6. So add to the stage like that. So more easily chainable adding. And where are we now? Great. So we don't center these circles on the stage. We're just going to add to those. We got a lot of them. We're going to add them to the circles. So we're adding them to the container. Don't forget to add them to the container. We'll make them a little bit smaller so we can fit a lot of them on there. And that's a var circle. Great. And we won't put them all there. What we'll do is we'll say circle dot pose, which is another short little method that we've added to add an x and y. So for the x position, we'll start over. This would be the sort of the margin of it, starting over 30. we'll add on, depending on I, what we'll do is take the modulus of that and imagine that we're going to have 20 columns. So what this will do is I keeps on increasing, but it will only ever go up to 20 and then back down to 0. Actually, maybe it goes to 19 and back down to 0, whatever, to get 20 columns. Okay, that's what it does do. And each time we will multiply that by some sort of spacing. So we'll say we'll space this by 30 as well. Space it by 20, space it by 30, doesn't matter. Yeah, that seems good. And then let's comma, and then we'll work on the y positioning of these. And so we'll start with the same 30. And we will add on a math.floor. So what we're doing is a grid here without doing an I and a J. We're doing a grid all with just an I. So cool. And what will floor is I divided by the columns. Might have been handy to change these into variables so we could reuse them, but anyway. So now it's the I, it's how many times it divides into the columns, but we're flooring that and we multiply that by the spacing, which was 30. Okay, so there we are positioning each one so that it will go into a grid. We've got a container of circles. We no longer have a circle though, because this circle is varred inside this function, only available inside here, nor would we really want to use it because that would just end up being the last circle made. So down below here, I think there were a couple places we referenced a circle. We won't bother starting in the center, and we'll just change this back to, what was it, a small thing that would be like 5 or something like that we said it is, and we'll bring it up to a 39 in size. We'll bring it up to a 30 in size. So we got a lot of these this time, so we won't quite go as far with our slider to make these bigger. All right, what else have we got? The slider's changing. Oh, there's a circle radius equals the slider.current value. Okay, so it's not the circle, but we need to loop through all of the circles and change those. Of course, we could just probably just scale up the whole, no, that would be a little bit different because that would scale the spacing as well. So we're going to loop through the circles, and here's where ZIM Loop is really cool, and you know, it looks like this. ZIM.loop, and in round brackets, please loop through the circles. That's a container, and each time call this function. We're so used to doing that, but now we collect the circle. So that is each child. Let me just pick this up here and plop it in there. Do you like? So loop through all of the circles. Each time, give me the child, so a circle, and then we apply that to that. All right, let's just save that up and see what it looks like now. Oh, that looks good. I think we have a mistake. Container constructor, not a function. Did I do something wrong again? I did the same thing again. I have the missing new problem. I forgot my new. That's funny. I rarely forget my news. I'm just, I don't know, jumping at the gun. Oh, there we go. That's nice. Ooh, cool, huh? Okay, so a lot of circles, and why don't we add an alpha to that? Now, we did make a shortcut for alpha to .fa, and I'm not sure I'm going to stick with that. It's kind of funny. So that's a shortcut of a chainable alpha. So I was using the first three letters, and alp, maybe I should use alp. Alp's not too bad. So position, the alp. I just thought people might think, but fa is also funny. I probably should change that to alp, shouldn't I? So I might have to do a little bit of a reverse and just launch 4.6. A little bit of a tweak. Let's call that alp. Then at least we've got the first 3 letters. You also have the first 3 letters of rotation, rot. Isn't that nice? We could call it rote if you like. So we've got pose, rote, and alp, or pose, rote, and alf, or fa, whichever. You'll have to take a look at that to see what we decided. But at the moment, it's a fa. So we refresh here, and now our alpha is down, and you can see the effect that we're getting. Okay, so the question is, Well, we do have a question. I just wanted to just touch upon a little bit more with the ZIM loop, though. It loops through 4 different arrangements. So it will loop a number, it will loop through an array, it will loop through an object, and it will loop through a container. So this is the example of the container. This is example of a number. Now, if you loop through a number, then the first thing you get is an I. Now, if you loop through a container, then you get the I right here, and you also get a total. So that's how many things we're going to loop through. You get a starting index, so start. You get an ending index, and you get the object back. So all of the loops will receive these as the last bunch of parameters. For a number, you don't get anything in the beginning. For an array, you get the element. So whatever, if you're looping through an array, you get the element of the array for each I. For an object literal, you get the property name. So property name followed by the property value each time, and then all of these things. So the ZIM loop allows you to do those 4 very common things in the same way. And I hope it's in an easier way. Plus you get some cool things like you go comma true here, and that reverses the loop. If you can spell true. If you can spell true, you can reverse the loop. And that's handy because when we're looping through a container, and we're getting circle here, when we're looping through a container, you don't want to loop going forward, because if you remove something, if you're removing something, it messes up the loop indexes. So you always want to loop backwards when you're removing something. If you hit something, looping through a container, find out if your mouse hit something, and you want to remove that, then you need to loop backwards. So you throw in a dot or a comma true there, and you loop backwards. So isn't that neat? Nothing to do with mobile optimization, just because we're on a loop at the moment. All right, so back to mobile optimization. How about if we want to cache these circles? Now, let's see. We are changing them. As you can see here, we're refreshing. We are changing them, but just because we're changing them doesn't mean we need to update the cache on them. So how cache works is if we cache it, it's okay if we scale it, and if we adjust its alpha, and if we rotate it, and if we skew it, I think. I hardly ever skew, but anyway, certainly scaling, rotating, and the alpha, and obviously changing its position are okay. So all that stuff's okay with something that is cached. And remember, caching is so that we don't have to make the processor calculate out the vectors of these. Mobile isn't as fast as handling images, which are cached, and then changing alpha, scale, and rotation position of those things. Now, if we actually change the shape itself, we may have to update the cache on it. For instance, we just have to be careful here. You may not realize it, but when we change the rotation of something, or sorry, when we change the radius of something, that is actually redrawing the shape. If we were to scale this, or what we can do is just set the circles dot width equal to the slider's current value. Now the width is twice as big, so we've got to multiply that by 2. So let's see if this works. When we set the width alone, that will, sort of like what HTML does, it will actually change the width and height. So it keeps the proportion of the circle. All right. If we want to change only the width, then we would say circle.width only. So let's try those 2 things. Now, when we change the width, it's a little bit unusual, and so the width is still working just fine, but that's scaling it now. So we're actually scaling that, which looks just fine as long as we don't cache. If we were to cache this and scale it up, we're going to see blur around the edges. But Create.js, if you scale something and it's not cached and it's vector, so if you're scaling a vector, it will keep the vector just as, just as if it were made at that size. Okay, so where were we? We're changing the width. Just beware though, the width is actually scaling it to get to that width. We could also set the scale based on the radius, but that's a little calculation. It is exactly the same little calculation that the width actually does. Let's just try a width only here, though. I think that's what it's called. Hardly ever use it. Width only, refresh. Yeah, there we go. That's kind of a neat effect, isn't it? So now we're adjusting the width only, and and that saves us time, right? You know, it's a pain in the neck. Almost 95% of the time we're adjusting the width of something, we want to change both the width and then the height. Okay, which is actually why CreateJS says, hey, you don't even have a width, just use scale. You know, just use scale. Well, anyway, that's part of it, perhaps. So great, circle.width, and we're changing that there, and that works fine. If we go back to the radius, we're actually redrawing the circle. So let's keep both of those around. I'll just copy it, circle.radius, and slider.current value, no longer the ×2. And we'll just go back and make sure that that circle.radius is still working. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. So that's step one, just to notice the difference between those two things, that the width is scaling it, the radius is redrawing it. Okay, up above here, we've got the loop where we go, here's our circle. Now here's where we're going to cache our circle. So we go circle.cache, and we specify based on the radius here, we should probably just throw this in a variable so we can play around with it a bit. Var r is equal to 5, like so. And then we can use r here. And when we cache it, we go minus the radius, because it's caching it from the center. The origin of it is in the center of the circle, and the cache is needing to go back a radius from that. So this is x and y back a radius on that shape. Comma, and then 2 times the radius times 2, because this is the width. So please don't just put r in there, you'll only get 1/4 of the circle. So r times 2, and r times 2, like so. So that caches the circle. Let's have a look. We save this and refresh. There should be cached, but watch as I increase this. Oh, we didn't update the cache. So since we didn't update the cache, we don't see any changes there. Just beware. This is what it would look like if you passed in radius and radius there in your cache. I don't know if you can see that. That's 1/4 the circle. If we make our radius a bit bigger, you can see it, I suppose, 20, and refresh here, 1/4 the circle, because we're going back a radius and back a radius that way, but our width is only a radius, so we only get this 1/4. We want a width of the whole radius, which is ×2. Width of, sorry, not the whole radius, the diameter, which is twice the radius, ×2. And we refresh here, and there we go. Okay, bring that back down to 5. All right, super. Now down below here, we said that we didn't see any changes because we weren't updating the cache. So in here, we can say circle.update cache, like so, semicolon. And we save this. There it is. Now if I increase the size, oh, what the heck is it doing? It turns them into little squares. That's because our cache is that size, and we're not scaling it. We are just redrawing the circle within that cache size. So that's not good. If we scale it, then it will, well, before I go, let's, before we continue on, let's just, instead of updating the cache, we'll comment this out for now. We will recreate the cache and see maybe if that does us any good. So we can say the same thing that we had up here. We'll just copy that, place it in here like so. We're recreating the cache based on the radius, so that means we better say R is equal to, do we need a var? Yeah, var R is equal to the slider's current value. And then we'll put R in there. Also, just while we're at it, put R in there when we want to come back to it there. So the radius is whatever the current value is, and now we're going to update the cache by redrawing the cache each time. Refresh. And there it works, but look, it's chunky. Ugh. All right, so you don't want to be doing that. You're updating the cache on all these things for, we don't want to do that. Okay. So do you get that? That processing power in our slider, we're updating the cache each time, and you can see that it's chugging here even on the desktop. It's not a good thing to redraw this cache. There's no point in doing that at all. However, there is point using cache. So let's get rid of this one. Circle.update cache, great, circle.radius. So instead of changing the radius, which redraws, recall when we update the cache here, we have a problem with the radius. It's redrawing it, but the cache is not being scaled, so it's just changing. It's just saved at that size. Okay, so instead of using the radius, we can scale it. So when we scale the circle through the width scales it, remember? When we scale it, or if we use scale here, then the update cache is, we don't even need it. So we don't need an update cache because the cache is just scaling. So the cache that we had made before is being scaled, and we end up with this. Refresh. Nice, huh? But did you notice something? Look at those edges. Let's bring back the alpha. We'll make a fa of 1. Refresh. There they are. They look fine there because that's a natural sort of vector made circle cached. But as I increase the size of them, they blur right out. It's like, oh, so you don't want that. In other words, what we should do is make the circles big and then reduce them. So if we make our circles big to start, what do we go up to? 30. So here we are making our circles big to start. Refresh here. We're going to get a bit of a jump, but they're big now and they're cached there, just like an image. And we get that jump because really we started big. And when we reduce it, it's still crisp. Okay, now that's what we would want for mobile optimization. And let's show you that the fa will still work on that, 0.5. Refresh. There's the alpha. Now in this case, we would want our if we're starting big like that, we've got a choice. I guess we could scale it right here and here. Let's see, what would that be like? That's dot scale. Do we know what we're scaling it to? No, we don't really know. So what do we want? We want dot width. Now width is a property, so we have to drop out of our chaining and go dot width is equal to 5. So that will scale it right here. I don't know if it makes a difference before or after, but there we are, doing it after just in case, and we refresh here. Something went wrong. Circle dot width equals 5. Oh, we got a little dot left on the end of there. I found that one. Woohoo! Okay, so there we are, and we're back to working pretty good. Did that look? Oh, 5 is half of it. 5, the radius, so we should put radius times 2. Thought that looked really, really small to start off. Oh, that didn't work. Do we have an R times 2? R is 30. Why do we have R is 30? Oh, right, we're running to set it. So my apologies. We start 5. So we know we want to drop it down to 5, and times 2 will be 10. So there we are. Oh, yes, look at that. We're back to normal. So there it is with the caching on, looking as good as always. Now, one thing about the cache that I think I warned you about already, but let's demonstrate it here. If you have a stroke to it, so frame dot purple, Pearl, purple. And let's increase that stroke to say 4 so that we can see it a little bit. As a matter of fact, we won't bother setting its width to smaller there. We'll leave it big so we can see what's going on. Can you see what's going on? I don't know. We'll keep the font back to 1 so that you can see that properly. And you see what's happening? It's chopping the edges of that, and that is because the stroke, half of it goes outside the shape and half of it goes inside the shape. So when we cache that at exactly the shape that we're making, or the radius that we're making, we have to add a little bit. So we have to subtract another 2 to move it over half of that that stroke that's on the left-hand side, half of that border, and then minus 2 there as well, and plus the width would be 2 on each side. So that would be 4 plus 4. And if we wanted to, we could put this in a little variable, var r and var b for border or whatever we wanted there. And if I refresh this now, there it is in full. You can now see that our cache has worked out just properly there. Ooh, doesn't that look neat? Let's bring back our alpha, our fa back, or our alp, I'm not sure. If we did that with scale too, scale, you see, you can't call a method the same name as a property. So we couldn't call those little methods alpha because you've already got an alpha property. So you're gonna, can't have both. Scale, you could have scale because there is no scale property. There's only scale x and scale y. So I went to scale. But if I made them all small, we would have pose, rot, fa, and ska for scales. That'd be kind of fun, huh? So I was like, darn, I want to just call it ska now. But anyway, what was it getting at? So alpha 0.5, let's take a look and see what that looks like. Because we didn't do the scaling though, it's not bad. You see what's going on when it's small? It's a little bit ergly. Yeah, it is ergly. I have found that when you cache a vector and make it small, you run into that problem. So if you can't handle that, look at that. If you can't handle that, you may just, maybe you can't cache this. You could redraw the vector each time, perhaps. So cache, and circle.width, we want it to start small. There we are. So that's where we're at there. I didn't notice it so much without the border on that. Save it up. It might look a little bit triangular on the top or something like that, but it'd probably be acceptable. Anyway, we've been goofing around too long here, but that shows you some things that you want to think about when you optimize for mobile. You can set ZIM optimize to true to make sure that your components aren't double updating the stage on you, or well, you'd be updating the stage yourself. And there's a bit about caching that we talked about. Oh, how do you even tell you're on mobile? Why don't we show you that? That would be zog zim.mobile, like that, and that will give you which mobile device you're on, like Android or Apple, etc. Tries to do the best there. Zim.mobile, and if not, it'll return false. So let's take a look here. We refresh and Control Shift K or F12. Did I miss it? Control Shift K. Okay, F12. Fine. False. We're not on mobile. We're on desktop. Okay, so that's also, you can do various things based on mobile. You might not, you may want to add all these rollovers and rollovers you don't have to worry about, but you might want to, reduce what you're creating, like adaptive design based on mobile. So there's a way that you can find that out within ZIM. Have a read of the documentation about that as well. Just make sure that that's covering all the mobile devices that you need in the way that you need. It's a little bit of a tricky thing to do, and there's some options there. Okay, so we talked about caching. You don't need to worry about your rollover events. The frame will handle that for you. You can override that if you want with a parameter, but frame will not do any rollovers if it's mobile. What else is there? There's the mouse downs. Please use mouse downs to make your clicks, so to speak, or your presses more reactive. Optimizing for mobile in terms of usability, there was the expand method. You could use expand, or we've done some things for you like slider handles and stuff, made those bigger for you. There's also responsive design, and we've already just taken a look in a previous ZIM capture. We took a look at responsive design, and that was when we looked at the layout class. Pages, by the way, I didn't mention it when we looked through Pages, but Pages handles adaptive design. So with Pages, you can swap different versions of a page depending on down here, you've got at any time you can ask for an orientation. You've also got an orientation change event, an orientation event that you can capture. Oh, not there, sorry. Orientation event here on the frame, much like the resize. And then based on these things here, you can provide different pages with Pages, the Pages class. So have a look there. Oh, and don't forget your hit test grid. Hit test grid are good. It's good both on desktop and in mobile, both mobile and desktop. Hit test grid is good for a quick test on grids. All right, take it easy. I'm inventor Dan Zen here at zimjs.com. Ciao.